Mr. Johnson's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for holding this important hearing on tax reform and residential real estate. And also, Mr. Chairman, thank you for asking me to serve as chair of the Real Estate Working Committee. I very much enjoyed working with the vice chair, the gentleman from New Jersey, Bill Pascrell, and we had our full and fill of meetings on real estate. So I don't know if you guys can tell us any more than we've been hearing over the past 4 weeks or not, but I met with local home builders in my district. We met with them up here in Washington. We met with the realtors in both places, and I was once a home builder, so I understand the important role housing plays in our economy. At the meeting, one of the things I heard was that it would be more difficult for folks, especially first-time home buyers, to get a mortgage if the mortgage interest deduction was significantly cut back or eliminated entirely. Mr. Calabria, as someone who knows a thing or two about housing and who supports getting rid of the mortgage interest deduction, I'd like to hear from you whether you think there's any truth to what I heard from the home builders in that it would be more difficult for folks to qualify for mortgages if the deduction was cut back in some way or eliminated.
I think it depends on what you assume about house prices. And, I think you'll hear on the second panel, and you've heard here, that if we get rid of it, house prices will come down. And so I want to go to the point that the ranking member raised, which is, I, as a homeowner, if the choice given to me was, would I like to pay a little bit less for that house, or would I like to have the mortgage interest reduction, and those two cases leave me equal, payments, I'd rather pay less for the house, quite frankly. So I think that it's not going to be any harder because prices will come down, which means people have to save less to buy that house. So again, there's going to be price effects, but I think that that's actually a plus, not a minus.
Well, as a builder, we never included that as part of our computation. You build a house for X amount of dollars, and you put the profit on there, and you charge people that price, and it doesn't make any difference what the deduction is.
And I would certainly agree, as a builder or a realtor, you have to take the market as a given, but because you don't necessarily drive the market, but the overall interest deduction does drive the market to a degree.
Mr. Toder, your thoughts on that same question, please.
Well, from what people I've talked to, and maybe someone else can contradict this, I'm not aware of banks, and I've dealt with several lately, asking anybody what their tax situation is when they're applying for a loan. They want to know your wealth, your income, your assets, but whether you're benefiting and how much from the deduction is not something that ever gets on the form. So I'm not quite sure.
No, they want to know if you can afford payments.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Calabria, later on we'll be hearing from Gary Thompson, the president of the National Association of Realtors, and in his testimony he argues that the tax system supports home ownership by making it more affordable. So is Mr. Thomas wrong here, or do you think the mortgage interest deduction inflates home prices?
I think the mortgage
interest it does, I guess.
I think the mortgage interest deduction inflates home prices by a degree. I also think it's important to parse out, the mortgage interest deduction is a subsidy for debt, not home ownership. We can come up with a variety of ways. I would argue if we want to subsidize home ownership, we should be subsidizing home equity. Give households something to pass on, not debt. So again, part of my objective here is not to change effective tax rates or not to change home ownership rates, but to change the amount of leverage and indebtedness we have in the system so that households have real wealth in that house, not just a big mortgage.
So in other words, you believe repealing the mortgage interest deduction would reduce home prices. How much do you think it would reduce them?
Let me first start to say it depends on the market. I think if you looked at some place like Houston where it's incredibly easy to build, there will be zero price impact. You look at some place like San Francisco, and I think prices will come down something like 10%. So it really depends on how tight the supply is in that market. You're not going to see a uniform impact. I would also add, in my opinion, the prices will come down in markets that are, in my opinion, way overpriced as it is. So again, not going to be an impact in most of Texas.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Mr. Toder, do you care to comment on that?
I agree. I think it's just very variable. I think probably there'll be some impact immediately in all markets because it's hard for housing to adjust immediately, but that will be very, very variable across markets.